Welcome to Indian time. This month is the which is the storytelling month, November. This is the time where, time of the year a long time ago when the Indian people had time to slow down and settle down from their year long of harvesting and gathering food and hunting, and it seems like the whole year was getting ready for this time of the year, the winter months, to settle down and make sure they had enough food to last them through the winter. So at this time is usually when people settle down and the first snowfall came, and after the first snowfall, then people were at that time would tell stories, whether you want to call them creation stories, legends, or coyote stories, but these were stories that were used as a tool to educate our young people about the values and the morals of life, of who they are as Indian people. And a lot of the stories were told in the evenings after the day. The people would gather around, and the elders would start telling their stories, and their stories that they've heard from their parents and grandparents. So a lot of the stories that are still told today are hundreds and thousands of years old, because a lot of the stories follow the creation of time. I guess that's why sometimes we call it creation stories, because from the very beginning, the story tells about the first people that were here, the animal people, and how the animal people prepared this land for us today as humans. And throughout that period of time, as the animals were going through, the coyote and the fox, a lot of landmarks were left, and these landmarks, land formations, were left to remind us about those times, about what took place. And a lot of the stories that go with these landmarks and these land formations all have an ending, that a moral to the story for the young people, so they can learn the do's and don'ts of life. So it's not only a time to relax at that time for the Indian people, but it was also a very important time, educational time for the young people. So the elders would sit around, and the people would sit around and take turns telling the stories night after night throughout the winter months. And sometimes some of these stories were so long that it took several nights to tell one story. And so as people know around here, a lot of the land formations were created at that time. They are connected to these stories. So it's an important time for our young people to learn the valuable lessons that were passed down from generation to generation. And so a lot of these, I guess it's not only a time to rest, but a time to educate our young people. And the rest was very much needed, because life then was very, very hard to continue to gather food and to hunt and to make sure that you were prepared for the winter months, that you had enough food to feed your family. So that's what this is all about, the storytelling month. And the place name that we have for today is one that was shared to us by Pete Beaverhead many years ago when he still was alive and was working for the Culture Committee. And it's something that some names that were just an interpretation of a place. So one that we're used today is will be Skadauken, which is a beaverhead, I guess, for the Beaverhead River. Skadauken. And a lot of these place names were given or by people as they traveled through these areas, and sometimes it describes the place, sometimes it was an animal, sometimes it was whatever was there and as people traveled and they utilized these areas, names were given for them. So a lot of our elders would say that if it has a name, then we use that. If it doesn't, then we probably weren't there. In the same way with animals and food plants, medicinal plants, if it has names, then they used it. The animal for today is what used for domestic animal, domestic goat, I guess it was. They called it which is referring to something smelly, I guess, as a small, smelly animal. The plant for this show will be Maninlp. Maninlp is a subalpine fir, which a lot of the people used for various different things. They used it for, as I would consider it as a hair tonic by some people, incense, a personal adornment. It was also medicine. So there was a lot of different ways and different uses for this plant by Indian people. And I guess some of the fir various has medicinal purpose for it. So it was used for cuts, ulcers, sores, skin infection, colds, coughs. So depending on how it was prepared and how it was used, how it was prepared was the use for whatever it was, whether it was for cut or for cold. So a lot of these medicines were gathered throughout the year, and it was important to have these, like I said earlier. They had to be prepared for the winter months. Some of the upcoming events coming up is we started in October. We have meetings with our elders to go over some of the work at the Culture Committee to make sure some of our work is correct and accurate. Veterans Day is coming up on Monday, the 11th of November, to remember all of our people who have passed on, all of our veterans. And Thanksgiving also coming up this month on the 28th. So those are some of the dates for this month. But also on this day, on the 9th of November in 1908, in Kutlehwinsu, or Sam Resurrection, Moodleman, Kekaishi, and Jackson Sundown left for Washington, D.C. to protest the opening of the reservation and a lot of other Indian issues at that time. And so they left here on November 9th in 1908. On the 10th of this month in 1853, Gabriel Prudhomme was appointed a tribal interpreter. At that time, a lot of people just spoke their language and didn't understand or didn't know the English language, so there was a lot of interpreters at that time. On the 14th of November in 1871, President Grant issued an executive order to remove the Salish to the Flathead Reservation from the Bitterroot. That took place on the 14th of November 1871, when the Salish people were forced to leave the Bitterroot, their homeland, and move to the current reservation at the Jocko. On the 15th of November 1909, again, Sam Resurrection wrote to President Teddy Roosevelt protesting the opening of the reservation. Sam Resurrection was one person who worked hard and tried desperately to keep the reservation from being open to settlers, and keeping this reservation that was reserved in the Treaty of 1855 for Indian people. On the 16th of November in 1809, David Thompson established Kalispeh House, which was the first trading post in this area. Those are some of the events that took place the month of November, and various times, various years. Today we're going to talk about an important issue, I guess. To many of the elders, they say that it is the foundation of who we are as Salish people, and that is our language. Our language, which without it, we wouldn't be able to perform or do some of the ceremonies that were given to us, that were passed down from generation to generation. We wouldn't be able to identify or to understand some of the place names that are throughout this country, throughout the Aboriginal territory. And our culture, many different things depend on our language. So today we're going to talk a little bit about that, the importance of our language, and what we feel is necessary, things that need to be done to preserve it. And today I have with me Shirley Trahan, who is an employee of the Salish Pend Oreille Culture Committee, and she is the language specialist for the Culture Committee. And today I want to ask Shirley some of the questions that pertain to language. And first, I think I'll ask Shirley is, what does the language itself, what does the Salish language mean to her today? So Shirley, welcome, and I guess that the first question is, what does language mean to you? What does the Salish language mean? Because you grew up with the language, you speak the language, and you learned it from your parents and grandparents.
The language is very important to me. I grew up learning the Salish Pend Oreille language and English at the same time. And my parents, as well as other extended family and all the tribal members I knew when I was growing up, they spoke the language. I think it was my siblings who spoke mainly English because they went to the Ursuline schools, and they had to speak English there. But all my years of growing up, until my mother passed away, she was always explaining the language to me. You say this for this reason, or something is said that way for a certain reason, and so I learned a lot from my mother and from her sisters, Christine and Annie, and other extended family, like Sophie Moise and Mary Kaiser. They were always visiting, and they always spoke the language. When you went out in the community to celebrations or stick games or wherever, that's what the people spoke, was the Salish Pend Oreille language. My mother is originally from the Bitterroot Salish, and when she married my dad, they lived in various places, and so they moved to the St. Ignatius area, and they were mostly with the Woodcocks.
And who was your parents?
My mother was Louise Mary Finley, whose parents were Petchum and Rosette Finley from the Valley Creek area. And my dad was Thomas McDonald Jr., and his mother was Agathe Ogden Finley. And so all those people spoke the language, and that's where I learned the language from, and it's, to this day, still very important.
Okay. Before we go on to the next question, let's take a short break here for our sponsor, and we'll be right back with Shirley.
Over the years, our people have lived through smallpox, assimilation, and starvation. We've battled alcohol, drugs, and poverty. Now it's HIV/AIDS. Help stop the spread of HIV/AIDS in Indian communities. Educate yourself and your loved ones before it's too late. This is real life. It has real consequences.
Welcome back to Indian Time. We're here today with Shirley Trahan, the language specialist for the Salish Pondere Culture Committee, and we're discussing the importance of the language and things that can be done, I guess, to preserve the language and what the language means. Shirley, we talked a little bit earlier about your feelings and the importance of the language. What are some of the things that you're doing to try to preserve the language as a language specialist?
Oh, okay, first I'd just like to say something back to what we were talking about before, and that was the importance of the language. It defines who we are. The language you speak is who you are and where you came from. And it's good not to forget it and keep it going as much as possible. Now, would you repeat the question again, Tony?
What are some of the things that you're doing down there as a language specialist to try to preserve the language?
Oh, currently I'm teaching a Wednesday evening class for beginners. We began by going over the sounds, mainly the sounds that are not in the English language. And those are the ones people have the hardest time with. And so we've been going over that and making sure that everyone knows the Salish ways of saying Salish and Pondere, which is Salish and Karispe Atkumstint. And that's for beginners. We want to start them out by knowing who they are. And on Thursdays we have an all-day class with a few of the elders who want to participate in the language. We start at 9:30 and we go till around 3 or 3:30, depending on how much energy everyone has after that amount of time. And both classes are so much fun. It's fun teaching people, and it's fun working with the elders because they have so much humor. And it's just really, really a great thing to do, is to work with the elders.
What time is your Wednesday classes?
I start at 7 and I say until 8, but sometimes we go 15, 20 minutes longer.
Okay.
And currently also, My daughter Adele worked with me on pictures. She found pictures that we could use for education and printed them out on the computer, and she put the Salish words with them, and I laminated them and put them in 3-ring binders. And I have done some lesson plans for numbers, and I'm going to put them in categories like animals, people, different things like that. And I have a few lesson plans for those things, but not very much.
Okay, when you're done with these lesson plans and with the pictures and things, are you going to make more than, are you going to make a bunch of them so maybe other people could use them, or how do you plan on?
Well, I think I need to make sure first that we can duplicate those pictures, first of all, and then if we can, make copies and maybe sell them to people or loan them out and do it that way. Right now, I can loan them out to some of the schools if they want.
Okay. Any other plans that you have that, besides curriculum, or and you do curriculum and then you do the language classes? You have anything else in mind that might be of interest to the public?
I always have ideas, but now I can't think of. Well, like today, this came about because of some brainstorming I did with the elders last week. One of them was to talk about the language or have some airtime either on this TV station or on the radio, using the language, explaining the sounds, and helping people to learn some words, learn some language sentences, or on whatever subject, and do it like that. Plus, we're brainstorming ways to make the language more fashionable or desirable to the teenagers, which maybe they would be able to spread it around their friends and use it. And maybe going out into the community, maybe asking people in Dronan, St. Ignatius, Arley, Dixon areas, if there are people who would be willing to volunteer maybe an hour, hour and a half a week to teach what they know in their communities, to be able to get it out more. And I think I have one volunteer in Arley and for beginners. And I think that would be good there because of the immersion school. Maybe would help the parents and the guardians of the little kids to, when the little kids bring stuff home, then the adults will be able to work with them on it. I plan to, excuse me.
Go ahead.
I plan to maybe ask parents to, or the schools, the Salish teachers in the schools to let me know what they're teaching so I can get it to the adults, to the parents, so they can work with their kids on the language.
That's good. Because I know that a lot of times that what the kids in school are learning, they come home and they talk to their parents or ask questions of parents, and their parents won't know because they haven't had that opportunity. So I think it's an opportunity for the adults, the parents, to learn along with their children. I guess it's a way to keep that communication with the young people.
Sure. Yep, that'd be a good way to do it. I understand here in Pablo there's hymns and prayers being taught. There were, at least last spring or summer, there were. And I just would like to encourage people to talk more at home amongst each other, wherever you see people you know who know the language, to speak the language as much as possible. And maybe other people, when they hear it, will get really interested. And that's another good way to learn it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you have plans for the future on the material that you're going to develop. It's just a matter of getting them together and doing. You talked about pictures. Are there going to be? Are you thinking about any audio or video kinds of things?
Oh yes, we do have the audio tapes on the drills. And we have CDs also, and we do have prayers. We do have other materials that we can make copies of for individuals if they so wish, probably for a small fee of a couple of dollars for the cassettes or whatever we use to help them. I need to learn more on the computer to do to do more language, maybe little stories, or on the HyperCard is what I'm aiming at, or any video program on the computers. I have a good computer, pretty new, that has this program where you can do short videos on their movies. So I'd kind of like to do that a little bit and find out how to do that and get that out to different schools maybe, or individuals. Mm-hmm. We do have videos that have the language on them.
Okay. Okay, Shirley, we're running out of time, and I want to thank you for sharing some of the information that you have, some of the things that you're working on. And I think that also, at times for you parents or you adults that have specific language sentences or whatever you need to work with at home, just call Shirley at the office at 745-4572, and she will help you develop some of these things for you at home. So with that, we're out of time. I'd like to say